Hi, this is Frat Props and Gaming. Today what we're working on is we're going to make fake rock from styrofoam. I'm using that to create a base for a vinyl Guyver figure I assembled a while ago. Now, as you can see, the figure's still completely unpainted. What I've decided to do though is I'm going to make this look like a rock base. Not necessarily rubble, but sort of rock. As you can tell, what I've done so far is I've got this MDF board. Bought this from a local hardware store. It was already shaped this way. It's like a display plaque, or for a craft. It only cost me a couple of dollars. And then I've just stacked 2 pieces of styrofoam on top that has been glued together with PVA glue. And all I've done is just trim it to the shape of the board and then underneath. Now the next step we need to do is we need to actually contour. Well, we need to carve all the edges to bring in some detail, similar to how a stylized rock would be on that. Now, because the Guyver is a figure from anime, this does not need to look real, but it does need to look slightly cartoonish so that it will kind of tie in. Now, you can see at the ends here, the top board doesn't go all the way out. That's because I'm going to kind of step the rock in and kind of have it progress inwards. Now that'll be, made from cutting sections out and re-gluing them back in here, or from other foam offcuts I have lying around. All right, so step one is to get a marker and just draw just some rough areas, rough sort of shapes where you'd like to actually sort of just cut out to sort of make like some rough kind of detail for rock. Now, you don't have to be incredibly accurate with this, and when you're cutting this out, you don't need to follow it exactly. All right, and remember, random shapes are going to be your friend in this, but the more twists and turns and things you put in there, the harder it's going to be. Okay. Now the goal is to make this look realistic, but at the same time, remember that it is from anime. It's a little bit tricky when you get to some of the stepped areas. Now, see, making that look like a larger sort of section of rock will be fine, because we can actually have either a gouge out of it here, or anything we take out we can sort of add back in to fill this area if we decide. But that's something we'll work out. Once we've done the actual cutting, we can work it if we need to add anything back in to make it look a little bit more realistic. Okay, so just sort of continue your lines. I'm just really kind of doing random squiggles, just trying to make sort of rough, weird, sort of loopy rock shapes. We're not trying to make it look like stacked stone, but we are trying to make it look like, I don't know, maybe a smashed cliff face or something like that. Either way, just add as much or as little as you want to make it feel realistic enough for you. You can, with some of them, continue the patterns up around the top, because we are going to carve the whole piece eventually. You can join some together, you can to make them further apart. Now, the figure I have has both feet planted the same level, and they're both planted flat. So I need to make sure that wherever we're going to pose the figure, I can keep that area like that. Now the figure is leaning forward, so we'll place him slightly backwards on the base. May angle him slightly more, just get the positioning, and then I'm just going to trace around his feet. Now tracing around his feet is going to let me know what sections, when I'm doing my detail lines, not to carve through. Doesn't matter if I get any sort of texture or marker on the feet of the model, like I have done around the edges. That doesn't matter too much at all. Because when we go to actually attach the model and then do the final painting, we have more leeway with all of that. All right, so just sort of continue your patterning, your theming along. Again, go as random, as loopy, as crazy as you feel like. You can add as many of these lines or as few as you feel like. Okay, it's all about what you're happy with in the end. And again, the final product doesn't need to look anywhere near realistic at all. So I'm going to trace this one up and over. Right, we can make a lot of them sort of go up if we feel like it. And then we can sort of extend the pattern on. Now you can always start to carve some of these features and then either choose to just ignore some sections or add more in, depending on how the look is going. If you're happy with it, you can keep going with it. If not, you can just choose to ignore some lines, some sections. But anyway, that's the basic idea of what we're going to do all the way around. I'll just stop at the moment and just show you the next part. What you do next is take your knife. Now again, I'm just using just a cheap retractable bladed knife. You only need a small amount of blade out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to follow these lines, cutting a V pattern. Now we're not going to cut too deep. We're going to go between 3 and 5 millimeters. Now all we're doing is just trying to highlight the detail. We're not trying to make it look like a perfectly rounded edge or anything like that. All we're doing is trying to make it obvious where the pen marks are. Okay, so all I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to do a small section just to show you what it's going to look like. Again, don't have to go overly deep, and this is why it's good to not have too many curves in your lines. Actually, I'm just going to change to a sharper knife. I know this is a bigger knife, which will make the cornering harder, but a sharper knife will give me a far better finish. Just go slow, and you don't have to do the entire thing in one go. You can take as many runs over it as you like. Now, if you make the groove you're cutting too thick, too deep, don't worry, because we're trying to simulate, well, animate reality is what we're trying to simulate here. So it doesn't need to be accurate. It doesn't need to be uniform. You know, the more variation and sort of difference you create, the better it will be. Now you'll see there, hopefully you can see with the shadows, we just made pretty much a basic slot there. Now you notice it's not the same width all the way along, it's not the same depth all the way along, but that's what we're going for. And once you've carved all of the patterns you've traced, you can trace more patterns, carve more, you can add as much or as little as you want. Okay, so what is, I'm just going to persevere with this a little bit longer, just to show you a bit more of the effect. Now, going around corners is not difficult, because all you do is just do each section like its own flat face. Okay, when you get to a joint or a corner or having to go over, all you do is just cut to that section and then come to the next area and just keep working. Now, this section for me is a little bit harder to cut through because when I glued the sheets together, it wasn't exactly neat, and I didn't clean up excess glue that squeezed out between the layers. So it's making these sections of foam here a little bit more rigid and putting up more resistance to the knife. But once you get them, it's all good, just knock it out. You'll see that we follow the contour there, sorry, they follow the line there. You'll notice, yes, we also have the flat faces and the hard edge. We'll take care of that once we've got all the actual details sort of started on here. Not all sections are going to cooperate with you getting the point of your knife in there. Using an X-Acto or a knife or a scalpel would make this a lot easier, but doing it here with one of the cheaper sort of knives, just to sort of demonstrate that anyone can do it regardless of your budget. Alright, any sort of tough sections you don't want, you can't get them, come back to them later. Alright. Use the tip of your knife to sort of pluck out any stubborn segments that you don't want to remove. If they're not quite cut all the way through, then just slice them a bit harder, maybe slightly deeper. If you do put quite a few bends in, Just move slower, move your knife back and forth a lot more. Just make lots and lots of small cuts. You will get the curves, even though I'm using a flat edge. Again, just takes more patience, a little bit more time. And the best thing with working with styrofoam like this is that it's very, very cheap and easy to get. A lot of times it's just free as packaging. So even if you want to take a sheet or just a section of a box or something like that, just draw out a rough pattern, just start practicing this and just see how you can make it look. If you get finding that your blade's starting to snag and pull the material out as opposed to cutting it, just come at it either from a different angle or just try cutting a bit slower. Sometimes the foam will be very rigid and very easy to carve. Other times you'll get like a very soft foam. Soft foams are harder to carve because they kind of flex and bend when you're trying to actually cut them. Whereas the rigid ones are great because you get, while they're a bit more resistance to cut against, that extra like stiffness and firmness of the foam makes cutting your detailed lines accurately a lot easier. Now notice there I just snagged the end out the top there and broke it out a bit. That doesn't matter too much though, because again, we're not making it uniform. We're trying to make it look a little bit organic and stylized. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll come back a bit later on when I've got all of this cut out and we'll trace onto it and I'll show you what we do next. Okay, now as you can see here, I've cut out all the lines we've already marked. Starting to get some nice texture in here. Starting to look good. We need to start following a bit more of a round to the top. Trying to get some more sort of natural shaping to it on there. Done all the lines we've drawn so far. So my next step will be to sort of continue marking out more and carving them. I'm choosing not to mark out the entire thing in one go because I want to try to sort of replicate this sort of look here. And I feel that if I mark it all out in one go, I'll probably lose sight of the bigger picture. Whereas if I do a section, look at it, if I like it, I'll sort of go to the next section, make sure it matches, ties in correctly, and I'll keep going. And I'll sort of try to work these edges in as I know more what the overall pattern's going to be. All right, so what we'll do is I'll come back a bit later and I'll have it all marked out, all rest cut, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I've done some more now. This is just the next section I've done. I've done around the top here. Had an unusual area, we're sort of joining and making a few points. So I've just sort of carved out a larger section there. Now it's very rough at the moment. We'll look at finishing that later on. At the moment, we're just trying to make sure it all sort of works out and lines up. Now I do have a few other things to look at. I've got a few sort of stamp patterns and things in the tops of the foam at some places. There's also sort of like little check marks all over it. Now we'll be taking care of those as we go. All right, all we're doing in this step is just trying to get all the actual shape taken care of. So I'll get that finished up and then we'll move on to doing the next parts. All right, back to working on the Guyver base here. What I've done since I last filmed was I've added additional stones and things to the top, just with bits of foam I've just added on and sort of just shaped them to try to make them look, try to tie in a bit better. Now, all I've done to shape them is just used a knife and just slice them pretty much roughly to the shape, and then I've just used sandpaper. Just a nice coarse sandpaper. The one I'm using at the moment for this, it's about an 80 grit sandpaper. All I've done is just taken a little bit of that, fold it up, you just put your finger behind it, and all you do is just kind of rub into it like that. You can actually round some of the edges over with it. Here like this. Quite simple. It's kind of an effective method for going through. As you'll see on this end here, I've actually added additional rocks, built them up, made some thicker, like that here, and extra edges and things like that. I've actually taken a section out of this one, rounded it over, more to sort of take away sort of the more square look to it. Now I'm happy to keep like the vertical wall that follows the base, because that's kind of the defining edge of the piece. But when we get to the top edge here, you know, I don't want too many just sort of straight jagged lines. So I'm going to try to use little bits of foam just to kind of blend those in. Now, how I've been doing it is I've got just some offcuts of foam I've had here, just from that I've taken from this piece. Now all I do is just find a block there, find a nice flat edge on it, on there, and I just kind of try to match it up to an area I'd like to build up. This actually looks like it might actually be a good piece for here. Actually turn it around though, because it's kind of angling outwards, and that makes it slope inwards a bit better. And then all I do is just kind of, just sort of gauge just by eye, you know, what to cut off where, just to try to shape it correctly. So I just take this corner off here, just like that. Just kind of, you know, just have a quick look at it sort of thing, line it up a bit. Alright, so if I take the front edge off it a little bit as well, to make it fit in a bit better. And the back corner's too far out. Now what I've done is, every time I've done one of these blocks on here, is I've just made it to a rough shape like that there. Now, when you look at it, it does line up on there. It does overhang slightly in a few areas. It's not perfectly shaped, but that's fine, because what I need to do is, first of all, is glue it into place. So all I do, just get the block, just a bit of PVA glue on the bottom. Don't have to be overly neat with this, because, you know, it will kind of sandwich out and squish around a bit. And I also don't need to apply a whole lot of pressure to get it to attach, because slight gaps and things are just going to appear as cracks in the stone once we're done. Okay, so I've got that glued on there. Now that's going to take a while to dry because it is PVA. But in the meantime, while that's sitting there, we can look at other areas. Now, as I said earlier, you know, in the previous part, was that there's little lines and markings on the tops of this foam because it was an old packaging box. Okay, so like here you've got like a pattern sort of stamped into it and things like that. Again, if you use your sandpaper, if you just actually lightly just rub it across the top, what you're actually doing is you'll take out the little kind of texture pattern that's there from the foam, and you'll also remove any of those sort of little grid lines and things that appear on here. You don't have to be too pedantic with doing that, because when we're finished getting the shape correct, we're going to have to coat the whole thing in PVA to seal it, and that will also harden it. But doing so as well, it will create a thin layer over the whole piece that will sort of hide a lot of these little blemishes and things like that. Okay? Now, a few that show through from that point on, we can hide when we do the paint. So don't worry too much. The main thing we need to get rid of at the moment is mainly like massively straight edges. Like here's a good straight, hard straight edge, but I think that one kind of works considering it's one of the only ones on here. Now with this as well, is I'm not going to gouge any chunks into the base, because I still need to keep it stable and solid and make it actually look like it is actually like a chunk of rock. But a few sections I am building up, as you see with the ones I've already done, and this one here. I'll probably build up maybe one more towards the back, probably this one here. And the rest I'm going to leave pretty much flat like that. And make it look like kind of it's been purposely leveled there. Now this end here is pretty much done. As you can see, I've already added all the extra elements there. Whereas I've deliberately left this end blank at the moment because I haven't done any work on here yet at all. Okay, just showing you just the complete contrast in the build-up as opposed to how it was previously. Okay, so you can add a lot of character very, very simply just with offcuts of foam. So I'm just going to go through and just sort of add a little bit more to this, just depending on sort of what size pieces I can find, you know, what's going to work for this. I have been kind of trying to marry up with keeping the outer edge the best and then kind of rounding it towards the end, but that doesn't always have to be the case. I think that one's going to be the better way. Now, because I'm not really lining this up perfectly, I have to be very gentle and just kind of cut very small sections at a time. So I don't want to take too much off. cause problems. Now that's a bit short, but that's fine because we can round the nose over as we go. Okay, so I'll take that corner off as well. Remember, this is not precise. This is not being exact. Oops, probably take a bit more off the front of that actually. The whole point of this is we want to make it random. You know, if you go if you work too hard to make it too exact and too precise, it's going to stand out. The only thing I'm trying to match at the moment is these edgings here around the base. I'll drop that piece because I'm a klutz. All right. So we're getting lining up better here. That's good. Now we've just got this back corner here to deal with. So I'll just slice a bit down. They're probably taking way too much off there, but that's fine. That's actually going to work quite well. I might take a little bit more off this back edge here. I'm just taking it off on an angle here, as opposed to cutting it all the way down, because rock formations don't have to always necessarily follow a particular trend. If you have any spare offcuts, put them aside. Alright, so that's going to be good there. Now what I'm going to look for is another little section for in here, just to try to extend it out a bit more. Maybe this piece here might be good actually. Take a bit off that. So if I take like that. You'll notice I'm just using old paper underneath where I work. Old paper works just as well as a cutting mat sometimes. You have multiple layers. It's really good if you're painting as well because it'll catch any drips and things and protect your tabletop. And the best thing is, it's completely disposable. So just ignore anything drawn on that. It's normally just sort of random sketches and things that I had an idea at one point and then went a different way. Okay, all right, so again, once it's ready, just some PVA on the bottom, blob it on, line it up, just put it in place a bit, squeeze it down a little bit, just a little bit of the glue oozes out. The glue oozing out means that you've actually pushed some of the air out of the way, which means the piece won't float off, and you won't come back hours later to find that the actual part has kind of drifted and is now covering your detail. But at the same time too, because the foam is such a soft medium, if we were to try any form of clamping, all it would do is just press a pattern into it, which we would then have to try to sand out. So to avoid any excess work, we'll keep it as simple as possible. Just sort of wipe off any excess glue, just so it doesn't run down the sides. Because what you'll find is the PVA will be harder than the actual foam. So if you then go to sand that or texture that side, you'll have it just then a line from where the glue run was. All right, so they're just there to dry. And that's all we've done for these pieces. So these pieces will have to dry now. Then I can shape them further, do the sanding. I'll just add some more pieces to this end as well. And then the piece will be ready to be sealed in PVA. So when I come back to the next video, the entire thing will have had 2 coats of PVA on it, and it'll be ready to undercoat. But prior to that, we'll work out how we're actually going to attach the figure to the top, and then go from there. All right. Thanks for watching.